Okay, class, this is the fourth part of our lesson over solving inequalities. Okay, in this particular video, we're going to focus on solving one-step inequalities with multiplication and division. Okay, so we've already looked at how to read and write them. We've already looked at how to graph them. We've looked at how to solve inequalities with addition and subtraction. So now, multiply and divide. So when we look at this first question, okay, we're kind of reviewing equations here real quick. So just to kind of get our minds straight on what it is that we have to do, because we learned in the last video that to solve inequality problems, we do them exactly the same way that we solve equations. So in this one right here, we've got 4x equals negative 12. So we have a multiply by 4. So to get rid of a multiply by 4, we know that we do the opposite in multiply and divide. So here I have a multiply, so we're going to do a divide in order to get rid of that. So if I divide one side by 4, I have to divide the other side by 4 as well. And again, since we've been working equations for 2 weeks now, this should just be habit to be able to do this line. So now these 4's divide out and become a 1, and we end up with x is equal to, well, negative 12 divided by 4 gives me negative 3. Same thing if we have a divide by 5. Okay, if we have a divide by 5, then we know that we do a multiply by 5 in order to get rid of that. So we multiply this side by 5 as well, and we end up with these 5's dividing out. And we end up with m is equal to, well, 4 times 5 is 20. And another way of looking at this question is still just 1/5 m. m over 5 and 1/5 m are the same exact thing. And if you remember correctly, to get rid of a fraction, we're going to multiply by 1/5. We do a divide by 1/5. But in fractions, we flip the second and multiply. We multiply by its reciprocal. So to get rid of this fraction, we just multiply by its reciprocal, which is the same thing that we did in the first example. So if I multiply this side by 5 over 1, well, 5 over 1 is just 5. So we just multiply by 5. And we end up with m is equal to 20. Same answer either way. So we need to understand how to deal with this division, okay, both ways, with a divide by and also with a fraction. So now let's look at inequalities. Okay, with the inequalities, again, we solve them the same way, but it's going to be very important for you to check your answer to make sure that it is correct. So in this first one, we have a 3x is greater than 15. So I'm looking for all x values that will make that true. So to do that, we've got to multiply by 3. So we do a divide by 3. And if I divide this side by 3, I have to divide the other side by 3 as well. And we end up with x is greater than 5. So what we need to do is we need to pick a value to see if that actually works. So values greater than 5 would be 6. That would be our first value, first clean value that would be greater than 5. So if I were to take that and plug that back in, 3 times 6 is greater than 15. Well, 3 times 6 is 18. Is 18 greater than 15? Yes, it is. So I know that that is a true solution. So now we need to graph our solution set. And we're going to do quick graphs. Okay, so we just draw a line, put a bar in the middle, take the number that we came up with, put it in the middle, and then graph it. So this one says x is greater than 5. So greater than means that I'm going to have an open circle, that it's not equal to 5, it's greater than 5, and then I'm going to shade to the right. And if you remember on the graphing, I told you that if the variable is on the left of the inequality statement, then the inequality, this thing right here, acts as an arrow, and it tells you which way to shade. Now, on the second one, we have a divide by 7. So to get rid of a divide by 7, we're going to do a multiply by 7. So we multiply the other side by 7 as well. The 7's divide out and become 1. And we end up with 1r is less than or equal to, and then negative 4 times 7 gives me negative 28. Sorry about those menus popping up. Okay, so we end up with r is going to be less than or equal to negative 28. Okay, so we pick a value, a number less than or equal to 28. Now, in order to do this one, we got to be kind of selective as to what kind of a number we choose. Okay, because I've got to divide by 7. In order to get nice answers, I need to pick a number that is less than 28, but yet divisible by 7. And the first one we have is negative 35. So if I plug in negative 35 divided by 7 is less than or equal to negative 4, well, negative 35 divided by 7 is negative 5. Is that less than or equal to negative 4? Yes, it is. So we do a quick graph. We put a slash right there in the middle of the graph, write negative 28, In this one, since it's a less than or equal to, we're going to put a closed circle, and we're going to shade to the left, which are the values that are less than negative 28. And that's all we do. Okay, it's about the same thing. So let's try this one. Now this one's going to be very important for you to check. Okay, so this one right here. Looks like we've got to multiply by negative 5. So I'm going to divide by negative 5. And I'm going to divide this number by negative 5. And we end up with g is less than, and then 20 divided by negative 5 gives me negative 4. So this tells me that in order to do this problem, I need to have a value that is less than negative 4. Okay, so let's try one. First one that's less than negative 4 is negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 5 is less than 20. Well, negative 5 and negative 5 make 25. Uh-oh. What did you notice? 25 is not less than 20. We must have done something wrong. Okay, well, what if I pick another value, okay, that's maybe less than negative 4? Maybe I just did my math wrong. Well, let's try one. Another negative 6. Negative 6 is less than negative 4. So negative 5 times negative 6 is less than 20. Well, this gives me 30 is less than 20. That didn't work either. Okay? So what you find out is that in multiply and divide, there is one thing that we've got to look at and we've got to pay attention to. When I solve it exactly the way we solve all the other questions, we get a value that doesn't work. But what if, because all the values that are less than negative 4 didn't work, so what if I tried one that was greater than negative 4? Right? What if we tried that? What if I tried maybe negative 3? Well, negative 5 times negative 3, is that less than 20? Well, negative 5 and negative 3, they make 15, and 15 is less than 20. What if I tried another one? What if I tried negative 2? Okay, what if I tried the negative 2? Well, negative 2 gives us a 10, which is also less than 20. So values that are less than negative 4 don't work, but values that are greater than negative 4 do. Okay, so what we need to remember about integers, what we need to learn, is that in an inequality, if I multiply through or divide by a negative number, my inequality flips whenever I'm doing the answer. So this little negative sign kind of acts like a fish hook. If you've ever gone fishing, whenever you cast out your line, okay, and the fish comes and grabs that hook, okay, that fish is going to immediately try to swim away from you. And your job is to flip it and bring it back towards you. And that's what this negative right here does. It acts as a hook, and it hooks and flips your inequality. If it was smooth like this, where there's no negative, works just fine. But if this number here with the letter, okay, this variable statement, if it is negative, it's going to flip the inequality whenever you're solving the problem. Let's try another one. So here is a division problem. We have a divide by negative 3. So to get rid of that divide by negative 3, we're going to do a multiply by negative 3. If this number right here is negative, this inequality statement is going to flip. Okay, this inequality sign. So I'm going to multiply by negative 3. I'm going to multiply by negative 3. So these negative 3's will flip. They will divide out, sorry. And this sign right here is going to go from less than or equal to greater than or equal to negative 18. So now this tells me in order to make this true, I need a value that is greater than negative 18, but divisible by 3. Okay? So greater than 18, the first one that meets those conditions is negative 15. Okay, so we take a negative 15, divide that by negative 3, and is that less than or equal to 6? Well, negative and negative make positive. 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. Is 5 less than 6? Yes, it is. So we come over here to do a quick graph. We put a slash on it. We put a negative 18. We put in this case, we put a closed circle on negative 18. And our answer is going to be answers that are greater than negative 18. So it's going to be the ones that are to the right. Okay. So what we need to remember, okay, if we have positive numbers, no problem. No problem. You solve it just like what we did with equations. But if we have a negative, Okay, if I multiply through or divide through by a negative, my inequality is going to flip. And on this one, we forgot to graph it, so we put a -4. This one's going to be an open circle. And again, I want the values greater than -4 to make this true. Okay, so let's try a few on your own. I'll pause the video and answer these 4 questions. Okay, let's see how you did. Okay, in this first one, okay, I've got to multiply by 6, so I do a divide by 6. Okay, this number is positive. The number I'm multiplying or dividing through by is positive, so my inequality does not flip. We end up with x is less than or equal to -3. So put a line on -3. This will be a closed circle on -3, shade to the left. Okay. This one we have a divide by +5, so I do a multiply by 5. I do a multiply by 5. Again, this number is positive, so I don't do anything to the inequality. It slides right on by. So t is greater than -35. So I need a line here with -35. Okay. And then we put an open circle on -35 and we shade to the right. Okay. Now on this next one here, we have a multiply by -9. So I'm going to divide through by -9, divide through by -9. This is the number I'm looking at. If that number is negative, my inequality is going to flip. So this is less than, so I flip it to greater than, so we end up with n is greater than +9 to make this true. So put a /9, put an open circle, because that means open circle, shade to the right. Okay, now this one's got a negative on the outside like that. Well, that negative means the whole thing is negative. So we have a divide by 3, so we're going to do a multiply by -3, a divide by -3. So I'm going to multiply this side by -3 as well. Okay, that negative then makes this positive. This negative here makes that inequality flip. And we end up with w is less than or equal to -15. So -15 less than or equal to is a closed circle, shade to the left. So if we have just a regular problem with the number that's with our variable is positive, just slides right on by that inequality and we don't do anything. But if it has a negative, okay, if the number we're multiplying by or dividing by has a negative, our inequality is going to flip. So remember that. Until next time.